Today is day 3 of a 3-day video. So if this is the first video you're watching, be sure to go back and watch the first one, which is an intro to HTML, and the second one, which is an intro to CSS. Today we're on a deep dive to CSS. So let's look at what our website looks like so far. And here we are. So we have these really cool borders. We have different fonts, we have different colors, we have different types of borders, but there's still some issues. So let's look at some of them. First of all, this margin goes this border goes all the way across the website. So we need some sort of margin to kind of bring it back in. Also, we notice that everything is left-centered and everything is kind of going horizontally. What if I want my fun facts next to my legacy, next to my learn more? And finally, we notice that there's not that much space between these boxes, which is making the borders look kind of weird. So I want to fix that. So how can we do that? So let's go back to our CSS. So the first thing we need to add is something called margins. So margins, all the attributes are right here, and let's try them out. So first of all, let's just try a margin. Let's try it on our title. So we're gonna add margin, and my favorite number right now is 47. So we're gonna try that. Margin 47 px. What does that look like? So we're gonna load this up, and boom, it moves it off of the sides of the website. So if we put it on the side, right next to the code, we can see as we change this number, and if we make it bigger, it's farther away from the sides. But notice that the difference that we're seeing is equal across the top, the bottom, the left, and the right. Now, what if I just want the margin to change on the left and the right? What I can do is I can do margin left. Let's make that 100 px. And I want margin right 100 px. So if we make a margin left 100 px. So for us to see this, let's take off our margin overall right here. If we look at this, we can see that it's just changing on the left side. And if we want to change it on the right side too, but this way we can specify, hey, I don't want it to change everywhere. I just want the left and the right to change. So this will solve our problem right here where we have that the borders are closing into each other. So let's go to our fun facts container. We're going to make the margin bottom 15 px. And see, we get a little space between our little points. Now let's make our legacy bottom the same thing. And boom, we solve that issue. We add some space. Now, what does padding do? And here we have the same things for padding. We have padding left, padding top, padding right, padding bottom. But do you notice how the fun facts is right next to the border? Let's say I want all of the stuff a little bit further away from the border. I don't want it all on the edge of the border. What I'm going to do is I'm going to take in my fun facts container. I'm going to make the padding mistake typing, semicolon, always remember the semicolon, and boom, it moves it over to the side. So padding is our way that we kind of move things over a little bit. We make sure it's not on the edge. So let's say for Grace Hopper, my title, I do not like how it's right on the edge. I'm going to make the padding, make that 15 px. And boom, it fixes it. Now the same thing, we can do padding left, padding right, all of those different things. Now, that is exactly how we kind of change it up so that way it's more like inside the border, and we can fix that up however we want. So I want you guys to play around with that and see what you guys can kind of come up with, how you can make the borders. For example, let's make the image. I want the top of this fun facts container to also have a margin. So margin top is going to be the same number, 15 px. And boom, we can solve those issues right here. So I'm going to copy I'm going to make it just padding left so that way we can see what that looks like. And we see it just solves the padding on the left side. So I'm going to move this for all of my little boxes. So yeah, I want you guys to play around with that and see how you solve it. So For example, if we look right here, we see that this is right on the bottom. So on learn more, I'm going to add a padding bottom. And that's going to be, let's make that 10px. And boom, we get a little bit of space. So this is really helpful when we want to make space on our website. And if we look at it over here, let's reload this, we see that we have this space, but we still see that everything is going really far out. Now there's two ways we can solve this. One way we can solve it, we can make the margin just smaller and smaller and smaller. That's always a really helpful way to solve these issues. The other thing is we can make the margin on our body smaller. So the whole margin, I'm going to set a natural margin for 20px. And that means everything gets shifted over a little bit. And that's really helpful to me. Now let's look at my code for my other website right here. Look at how I got this all to be sort of centered right here. And we see I changed the words, added some paragraphs, but I got it to be centered. Now I want my website to be centered like that. So what did we use to do that? We used something really cool called Flexbox. So Flexbox is this mechanism for organization and alignment. And the way we do that is we create display flex. So the way Flexbox works is if we have a container, so if we're grouping up a lot of different things, then it will line it up horizontally. So let's show you an example. So this is where our divs are really important. So if I want my 5 fun facts, my legacy, and my learn more all next to each other, I'm going to create a big div around them. I'm going to call this div, we're going to name this div testing out Flexbox. Testing flex. Okay. So it's called testing flex. Remember, we want to add the div around here, all the way at the end. So we have one big hug holding up everything. All right, let me make sure that. Give me 1 second to figure out what the issue is we have here. Okay, so our issue is that we don't have a div. We started this before the div class fun facts container, but remember, we don't want the div class fun facts container to be the biggest one. We want our testing flex to be the big one. We're just going to move that inside and boom. Now everything looks back to how it looked like before. But, so it looks like nothing changed, but this is where things get really interesting. So we're going to take the testing flex object. We're going to add display flex. And boom, we have them all right next to each other. Load it up over here. Boom, all right next to each other. So we still have some issues. First of all, we see that they're not all the right size. We see that we have an issue right here with this little border right here. So how do we solve this issue? So the first thing we want to do is we're going to look at all of our different things that we have. So the first thing we have is flex direction. So we made it a row, which is exactly what we wanted to do. We have a row left to right. We can also have a row reverse if we want to change the order. We can have a column. We make column, which reverse, which is the same as row reverse back and forth. So we're going to stick with row right now, but we can try out row reverse later. Actually, let's just show you what row reverse looks like. So we're going to do flex direction, row reverse. What happens? Look, it switches the order of everything. So that's really cool in switching orders. But here's what we're trying to do. We want there to be space around it. So this image is a little blurry, so I'm going to explain what each one is. So flex start is how everything goes towards the left. So that's what we already have. Flex end is everything is towards the right. Flex center is everything is right in the middle. Space between is how we add space in between each item, and space around is we add space all around all the items in the container. So let's try space around. So we're going to go justify content, space around. And what happens? Let's look over here. And boom, we get that little space that we want to have right there. Now, notice how, for example, our legacy box is kind of stretched out versus these ones are all kind of stretching out so it fills up the whole thing. That's just because of a margin situation. So if we add a margin within our larger box, let's add a margin of, let's make it a 50 px margin. We see that we make it a little bit smaller. So that solves the issue. But we want to make sure that we keep the space between. So let me put the margin before the display flex. And sometimes you have to play around with things, especially with flex, because this is definitely a little bit more complex. So let's take out the margin for right now. Let's see if our space around is going to work. Okay, so we're back to working. So why is this one a little bit taller than the other ones? Can anyone tell me? So first one is because we have a margin on top for this one versus we don't have it for the other one. So we can add the margin on top for these other ones and make it look the right height. So let's go to all of these different ones, make it margin top. And we want, what do we want the margin top to be? We want it whatever the other one was, which was 15 px. Okay, and now they're all the same height. And then, I don't know why the space around. Okay, so we're just gonna have to look at it here because for some reason it's not loading properly on the side one. But that's okay, that's okay. So let me show you what I was trying to show you guys earlier with the margin that wasn't working on the side one, but it'll work when we add it, when we look at it over here. So we're gonna stick with flex. Sometimes it works better on this side, but now we see we added a margin and it's more in the center. Now let's say we want to add a margin on legacy, or we want to add a margin on learn more. We can still do that. Those margins still exist. So if we want to add one on legacy, let's like a margin left. That's going to be 30 px. I'm just going to close this stop one because for some reason it's just not looking right. But look, we see right here, we're able to get that margin that's bigger over here and smaller over here. But we don't want that. We want them all to be even, so I'm just going to take that out. But I'm just showing that you can still make margin within flex. Now, let's say we want it center, and I'm going to do that for my title because I want my title to be center. So I'm going to take my title, I'm going to do display, flex, and then justify content, center. Our reaction is boom, we get it right in the center. And now all we need to do is we just need to set our margin so that they go properly around here, or we can just fix our padding as well to get it correct. And here, let me show you how you fix your padding. So we can just fix our margins, we can fix our padding, and we can get it fit right. But the point is that we have it right here in the center. So I like the way that this looks. Now, what are some other changes that we can make? Let's look over here. So we can also not just line it up along the x-axis or horizontally, but we can also line it up vertically. And we can make it centered vertically. We can stretch it out, which is the default. That's just going to fill it up. We can do baseline. We can do flex start. And we can do flex end. So let's try this out over here on our about me part. So I'm going to make, what's the first thing we do? First we need to make a div class that holds everything that we want to flex out. So I'm going to end the div class first, which you don't necessarily need to do because there's not an opening. I'm going to open this div class, and this is going to be called, let's call it all about me container. And close that div class. So right here we have the all about me container. And remember, the capitalization has to stay the same. That is actually very important. So we're going to make that display flex. What happens? It goes all horizontal and like this. Now, personally, I don't like that. I want the title to stay the same, but I want the all about me. So how do we fix that? We just go back to our HTML. We take our div class and we're just going to move it right so it starts after the title. So it starts right with all about me. So what does this do? So that this makes this all circular. Now, I do not like this one bit. Because what I want is I want these ones to be columns, but I want this one to be next to it. So I want this to be centered and then this to be next to it. So how do we do this? So we're going to have to make another div class. We're just going to make another div class. This is super easy. Make a div class called all about text. We're going to make that div class. And then we're going to end it over here. And we're going to end it with the paragraph. Okay, so what does that do? Well, we see it already happening. It makes the text so that it's centered, and then we have the text over there. Now, this is really helpful because essentially what we're able to do is we're able to create another item. So we can still have it vertical, but we can still have stuff next to it. And that's really helpful. So we can center this again. I prefer my stuff centered, but you can make it all to the left, all to the right. Let's show you how it would look like if we made it all to the right. So we would just do justify content, flex, end. And what happens there? Flex N. Let's see what it looks like. Flex N, all that happens is that we move it so that it's closer to the end of the thing. So there's all sorts of stuff we can play with the all about me. We can do with the Flexbox. And honestly, Flexbox is my favorite part of CSS because there's just so much to do. And this is just a small part of all the things you can do with it. So I don't want this next to each other, so I can just do justify content, or we'll do flex direction. And then we're just gonna do, let's make it center. Or no, let's try flex N. And remember, and what happens when we do that? So first of all, we get a column, and then we see it all goes over there. So we're gonna make it center because I think that looks pretty, but you can do whatever you want. I just want to give you an example of what everything looks like. And then let's try align items because we have not done that yet. And align items is vertical, and that's how things change vertical. So let's make a align items. Let's try center, or let's try flex. Let's try baseline. Align items baseline. And what happens when we do that? It's just going to center it right there. And baseline doesn't look quite as right when we're talking about it being column, so it might be a little bit easier for you to understand a baseline if we do it on the bigger one where we have stuff that's not a column. So I'm just gonna make this center, but let's change it over here. So align items, let's try it on the testing flex. So let's try align items. What does that do? It makes everything the right size. So I like baseline. I think it makes everything nice and tight, but if you want more space, then you can do it that way. And yeah, so just play around with your margins, play around with your website, and you'll get a really cool looking website with amazing information. So I hope you guys had a lot of fun learning more about websites. If you would like, you can email me your final website, have your parents take a picture of your final website and email it out to me. And I love to see the amazing creations you guys make. Thank you guys so much, and I hope you guys had fun at Supercoders this week.